How's it, guys? Welcome to the second episode of King Encounter. Before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to Lighthouse of the Nations Church for this great venue that they've just blessed us with. Man, we are truly blessed for that. So we're sitting down today with Darren, who's going to be sharing his life story and how he got to know the Lord, how he got to this point. Dude, Darren, welcome, bro.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, dude. Thank you so much for sitting down with us, man. Dude, like all stories, let's start in the beginning, man. Tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. And obviously, the message that I'm about to share with you of my life story is to obviously glorify God.
Come on.
And He is the number one person in this story. So, if I have a look at my childhood and my upbringing, and let me say this, hi, my name is Darren. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And I'm an unapologetic Jesus freak. I'm an unapologetic alcoholic and addict. And I wear that with pride because of what God has done in my life. And so let's start from the beginning. I was born into a very dysfunctional family. Mom and dad got divorced when my mom was 4 months pregnant. And it was due to infidelity on my dad's side. Later on in life, I think my dad justified a lot of his indiscretions by saying that it was because my mom wasn't really present in their marriage. And also, he despised alcohol, and I couldn't understand why. I later grew up to understand why he despised alcohol. But he blamed alcohol for being the ultimate reason why they had separated, but never really owning up to the fact that he had, actually, what is the word that we're looking for here? He was the one that caused the infidelity and the reason for my mom ultimately leaving him. And he justified it by saying that it was because of my mom's drinking and her party lifestyle. And they were young when they got married. I think they were 23, 24.
Okay.
Later on in life, my dad eventually admitted to it and said that he did cheat on my mother. But this time justified it again by saying that he was lonely. So, as a child, like, that is what I was brought into. I was brought into a dysfunctional family, in a broken family, almost, if you want to call it that. I was very torn between both sides of the families, between my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family. And it made it extremely difficult because you never knew who to really actually believe. And as a kid, I think it just put a lot of unnecessary stress and burden on me. You had your mom telling you one thing about your dad and your dad's parents, and you had your dad telling you one thing about your mom and her family, and it was literally like I was like a pawn on a chessboard being moved around constantly, but only to hurt the other party. And it was very disruptive. My mom remarried when I was 2 to an Afrikaans gentleman, and this was a boer. He was a proper boer. He owned a plot in Petite. My mom remarried, and I grew up on that plot. And he was a gas installer, but he also had his own veggie and livestock produce, and that they used to sell at the markets. So I grew up with a lot of livestock. I grew up on a massive plot, which was amazing. At a very young age, I fell in love with nature and animals and that type of sort of environment. However, the household itself between my mom and my stepdad was what I now understand not to be a very healthy relationship. The love was there, you could see it. But you had my stepfather, who I now understand to be a functioning alcoholic. He worked really hard. Always ensured everything was taken care of, made sure my mom and I were taken care of, all bills were paid. But like clockwork, when you got home, the first thing that came out was a drink. And it was never just 1 or 2 drinks, it was at least a bottle or 2. But it was the same for my mom as well, like she followed suit. And this is what you call a functioning alcoholic. Like they would drink from 5 and finish at least 2 liters of whatever it is that they were drinking by 12 whenever they went to bed. And this was a Monday to Sunday thing. Saturdays and Sundays for my stepdad were just a lot earlier because it would be rugby with my grandfather, and rugby was always early mornings. So it was a good sort of opportunity to start the drinking. But I don't remember very many days where there weren't arguments and fights in the house. And this only happened when both of my parents, and this being my mom and my stepdad, just so that you guys understand who I'm speaking of, it only ever really occurred when they were intoxicated. And, you know, it was hectic. Like, it was hectic verbal fights that they had. But the weirdest thing for me is the very next day, like, nobody spoke about what happened. You know, I never dared ask any questions because, you know, I'd immediately be told children should be seen and not heard. And, you know, it was very chaotic. And that verbal abuse that came out in that relationship eventually turned out to become physical. And when these things happened, I didn't deal well with conflict as a kid. I didn't know how to deal with it. So what I did is I would leave the house for fear of actually getting the brunt of that fight, which I would say probably about 7 out of 10 times I did get the brunt of it. So it was easier just to rather leave the house and go and explore the plot and do whatever than actually be involved in what was going on. And, you know, I understand now in my later years, like when my mom used to say to me, you know, it's adults' problems, it's children should be seen and not heard. I think it was her way of trying to shield me from what was actually going on. And that was okay. You know, obviously my dad wasn't in the picture at the time either. So I think it was when I was the age of 4, I had to start appearing in front of a family attorney and family courts because my dad was fighting to get custody of me. And that was very traumatic as well because then I really got to see what was actually going on between these two families, you know. And having to sit in a family court and having to sit with the child psychologist and having to do all of this was hectic. But my dad eventually managed to obtain supervised visiting rights. And I think that lasted for about a few months, where he would come every second Saturday and it would be supervised. And it was really cool. It was actually nice because obviously there were some ill feelings that I had towards my stepdad. And obviously for me it was, you're not my dad, you know, and I understand why I reacted that way. So when this happened, my dad eventually obtained weekend visiting rights every second weekend. And this for me was a complete adaptation to my routine of normal life. And I was excited because there was so much crap going on at home that I just isolated, you know. And when I got to actually leave the house, like, and go and actually see my dad every second weekend, I didn't have to escape so much from what was going on at home. And my dad and I grew extremely close very, very quickly. You know, he is and he was always a very humble man, very gentle, very loving, very affectionate. And because I was seeing my dad every second weekend, I was getting to see my dad's family more. And it was the weirdest thing. My mom's family were not very affectionate at all, and my dad's family was extremely affectionate, which is something I think I really lacked in my household. So I think that's also what made me feel more secure, was the fact that there was that affection and love and attention. And my dad became like my superhero, you know. I got so excited for every second weekend because I was so tired of all the rubbish at home. And eventually I started opening up to my dad and I started speaking to him about things. And I think naturally I had a lot of questions like, why couldn't you just try and fix it? You know, and he never really gave me answers to it. But I do know that he did start picking up that there was a lot of deep-rooted issues going on at
What
home.
age? What was that age?
So that was between the age of 4 and 7 and 8, I would say.
Sure.
So just as I went to grade 1 and was evidently in grade 2 when I moved schools, that everything that I had told my dad of
Yeah.
what was going on at home, he eventually took all of that stuff and he tried to use it against my mom. And that's somewhat short-lived harmony between the two families, like dissipated in a blink of an eye.
Broken
And
trust,
naturally, my mom just retaliated.
Yeah.
So again, it was back to being the rope in between a tug of war
Yeah.
between two families again. And that was just my life. It was always chaotic,
Yeah.
you know. Primary school came, and primary school absolutely sucked. I went to a total of, I think, 7 different primary schools. So I never really stayed long enough to really fit in with anyone. And it was weird. The 4 primary schools that I did go to, I got severely bullied for my weight. And obviously with me being an English person, being moved out of an English school to an Afrikaans school, I didn't really fit in with Afrikaans kids either. I think the coolest thing was that I didn't have to wear shoes at school anymore. That was the best part. But I never stayed long enough to really make friends. But what I find weird is, you know, when I came into recovery and when we get to that, like when I had to go and journal, I was okay with the fact of being alone. Like I was okay with not having friends. And that's not normal.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be the way a child's life should be. Primary school came and went, and like I said, it sucked, and life just continued. And, you know, I think now being a recovering alcoholic, I can see the chaos that I've caused in my life. I can actually see what was going on in my household, and I understand that alcoholics thrive in chaos because that's all they know. And this is where I say, like, God has given me sort of like little small spiritual awakenings in my recovery. Like, I can choose to be resentful towards whatever happened, or I can be accepting of it and forgiving of it, and understanding that it was their path, not mine. So that was basically just my childhood in a nutshell. If I look at my mom's side of the family, heavy drinkers all the way through. I think my dad didn't drink, and he told me I'd stopped drinking at the age of 21, but never ever told me what made him stop. However, he used to always roll out a cigarette and fill it with other stuff. When I was old enough to actually understand what this green stuff was, I was like, I don't care. This man's at least loving and attentive. You know, it's not like he's being abusive. And that's what my stepdad became later on in my childhood, was extremely verbally abusive at the start, and then it became physical. And then it got to the fact when I got to high school and I could actually stand my ground. And then came to realize that this man's not really stable on his feet. I could just probably give him one smack and he would fall over. But I never did that. But that's how intense the fights used to get. So you asked me to speak about my childhood and my upbringing. That was primary school. Going into my teenage years, I went to high school. And I remember telling my parents that I don't want to move schools again. Like, if I go to a high school and stay there, I want to finish it. I'm tired of being uprooted and moved around. And I still said to them, if you guys do decide to move, I'll move in with a family member or I'll move in with a friend. And the high school that I applied to, none of my current primary school peers were going to. And I was ecstatic because, like I said, I was very, very severely bullied, especially in my last primary school. And I was like, okay, this is like a chance for me to start afresh. Like, people don't know me. I'll be able to form my own identity. I mean, you are at that age of 13, 14 where you do start developing your actual character, you know. And, you know, in primary school I was a loser, and when I got into high school, it was the complete opposite. I fell into the cool crowd of kids, which turned out to be the rebellious crowd.
Yeah.
You know, but at the age of 13, already in grade 8, I used to catch the bus after school, and this one friend that I had made friends with stopped and bought cigarettes, by one of the little quaisks, or whatever you want to call it, from an African lady, and he bought Camel Filter, and he was like, "Do you smoke?" And I'm like, "No, I don't smoke." And bear in mind, I was quite behaved and well brought up in that sense.
Yeah.
But I had finally got accepted into this group of kids. So they were like, "Do you want to try?" So I said, "Sure." And the only reason that I actually did try smoking was for the fear of rejection. I didn't want to lose these friends.
And this is grade 8 still?
This was in grade 8, yeah.
Okay.
And that was the reason why I decided to do it, was the fear of rejection and not being included in that group. And had the cigarette, had an extremely head rush, like high, whatever you want to call it. I still remember sitting on the pavement coughing my lungs out. But the weird thing is, it was exciting.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And it made me feel accepted by my peers. So I did it for all the wrong reasons, but instantly I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed the feeling of it. So that's where things started off, was with smoking. I wasn't a bad scholar between grade 8 and 9. I was still top 10. And then at the age of 14, when I was turning 15, going into grade 10, that would be around the same age, there was a specific incident that happened. So my stepfather's brother used to come every Friday. It was tradition, it was a family tradition to do takeouts and movies.
Okay.
And they would just use it as a chance to just get absolutely smashed. And this gentleman, unfortunately, and fortunately, now, like I said, as a blessing, he sort of sexually assaulted me. And the first time that it happened, like, I didn't really know what to do about it. It's weird, it's still hard to talk about it. I've recently come to accept it, but, to articulate how you feel in that exact moment, I literally just froze, and I was like, I don't know what the heck is going on. Bearing in mind I was 14, going on 15, and it happened, and I remember that he left the room and he went and slept in another room, and it was early hours of the morning. Like, I remember I left the house and I went and sat in the park, which is literally 2 blocks away from my house, to like actually just process what actually happened. And in that park, I decided that this was something that I would take to the grave with me, because it's my fault. I allowed it to happen, and what the heck just happened? I couldn't really put to words like how I was feeling about it. But one thing I did want to actually mention earlier was, as much as my stepdad was a full-on alcoholic, and no matter how hard that man drank on a Sunday we were in church regardless. And I was brought up Christian, and I absolutely loved going to Sunday school. I fell in love with it, with this man Jesus that they taught me. This man that's so majestic, and that his love would endure forever, and no matter where you go in life, like, he's always with you, he's next to you, and that is how I was brought into Christianity, and that's what sold me on it. I still remember my dad. He is Christian, but we're still working on actually refining that with him a little bit. He used to say to me, he used to sit in that freaking bath and sing Jesus songs, and it would irritate the heck out of me. But that just goes to show you how on fire I was as a kid for Christ. But when this incident happened with my uncle, something inside of me died that day. And with that, like, I just decided, you know what, what God could actually allow something like this to happen to me. You know, if His love is so great, and if I am so much of worth to Him, why me? And I walked away from my faith. I literally did. I said, I'm done with this Jesus and God concept. If this is the type of God that I need to serve and this is what happens, I don't want to be part of it. And I think that's where my downward spiral in life started. So like I said, it started with the smoking. And one Friday after school, we went to the bottle store, got a pack of pop sock, got a bottle of Cocoa and a 2-litre Sprite, and a box of 30 Stuyvesant. That's what I remember. And we went to that exact park where I sat after this incident had happened.
Yeah.
And I still remember the guys chugging like the Sprite to at least have it down to half. And they filled it with the alcohol.
Sorry, Darren.
Yes.
What is a pop sock?
Pop sock is wine. Yes, very, very
Sold a
cheap form
bag.
of wine.
Yeah.
Yes. So just bear in mind, we were teenagers. We didn't really have much money.
Yeah.
The fact that we actually managed to obtain it was a miracle in its own. But yeah,
Well,
we
not
finished
a miracle.
that.
This is good.
Well, that type of, yeah. So, but yeah, and we sat in that park and we just got absolutely smashed, and it was my first time drinking.
Yeah.
I remember I was sitting on a merry-go-round and like that's as far as I remember that afternoon. I don't remember anything after that except for my friend helping me into the house and my mom like screaming at the top of her lungs and fighting, and I was just like, I can't deal, like I just want to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And I did go and sleep, and I woke up. When I woke up, I felt so horrible. Like I experienced my first hangover. I was sick. I was vomiting. At that time, I was smoking already, like frequently. So
Yeah.
I could smoke in the house because parents smoked in the house. I never smelt anything. But I had such a bad headache as well. And it was 11 o'clock at night. I had come home at 4 o'clock. So obviously the things had set in. But one thing that I do remember is I loved the freedom I felt. And in my mind, I was like, at long last, the solution to deal with what's going on in your life. And that's when my drinking career started. It started off with like once or twice during the week, and it progressed to quite frequent. My grade 10 year, I remember we got off the bus. I had made friends with another girl, and she hit a panic one Friday, saying that she's going to be late for work, And I was like we're 15, 16, like, who works on a Friday? Like,
Yeah.
what work do you do? And like I said, this gentleman that had sexually assaulted me, had come every Friday. And unfortunately, it wasn't just one incident. It did happen a few times. And she had told me, no, she was a waitress at a local restaurant in our suburb. And I was like, okay, it's Friday. And I said to her, like, do you think they will allow me to work there? And I was a year younger than her. And she said, yeah, sure, like they're always in need of extra hands. And I went straight home, got dressed, and went and started working that very same night. And as the team was cashing up that evening, it was surreal. They were all a little bit older than me. But I managed to blend in with them very easily.
Yeah.
And that was something I did well as a teenager, is I would camouflage to my surroundings just to blend in. And they were catching up and they were having pre-drinks and what have you, and they said, we're going clubbing. And I was like, okay. And innocently, I just said, okay, well, that's cool. Like, do you want to go with? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to go with. I don't want to go home. It's Friday. And so I went to my first club that evening. And as I went to that club, I got introduced to my first drug, cocaine. And if I think
And this is
alcohol
still
made me...
at grade, just after grade 10, or still in
Yeah,
grade 10?
that's grade 10. Yeah.
Okay.
So, got introduced to cocaine. And like I said, if I thought alcohol made me feel good, like, I felt invincible on this stuff. I still remember walking out the club and I could hear the birds chirping and the sun was rising, and I was like, holy moly, like, this is life. This is amazing. I feel honestly like at long last I have a permanent solution now to not have to deal with anything in life. And yeah, the using of the substances and the narcotics became an every weekend thing. The drinking was like once or twice or 3 times during the week. And it had actually progressed to me stealing alcohol from my parents as well, which was not normal. I now understand that it wasn't normal, but back then I was like, I was just a teenager, like living life. And, you know, but one thing I do know for certain is I did not deal well with emotions. I did not deal well with conflict. You know, I was extremely introverted, but when I used or when I drank, I was extremely extroverted. And I did a lot of these things just to sort of fall in with my crowd, but not just for that. Like, there was a lot of pain and a lot of depression that I was going through, and I didn't want to tell people about that. I didn't want to tell people for the fear of, she's dude, are you okay? Like, you know, it's a whole thing of pride almost. And I finished matric, and, you know, I wasn't a bad scholar. My parents did force me to go and study immediately after school, which I didn't want to do. I wanted a gap year. I wanted to do a country ticket tour, you know, and I know why I wanted to do that, not just for the touring, but, you know, and they were like, no, you need to go and study. So I applied at GTI for psychology, got accepted, and I think if I went to a total of 28 classes, that was a lot. And that's what I'm saying. High school was fun. Student life was even better. Now I'm licensed to party. Like, I'm of age. Well, I wasn't really of age because now the places that we wanted to go was 21. I'm like, geez, you're waiting until you're 18 to actually legally be able to do things. But I think the substance use and the drinking finally caught up with me, and I finally actually started having consequences because of it, and not good consequences. And the first consequence of it was I flunked out from my first year of studying. I didn't tell my parents. I just stopped going to varsity for fear of actually telling them that I was not coping. And it actually took a lecturer to call my mum, and lecturers don't generally take an interest like that. And he just asked, like, is your son okay? Like, I see he's on campus, but he's not in class. Like, so I got back home that day, and my mum's like, so how was varsity? I'm like, no, it's good.
Snitch.
And she was like, oh, so Mr. Watson called me, and when she said that, I was just like, oh, shucks, it's game over. And I still remember I was extremely high, so I started giggling because I was just like, I told you I didn't want to go study, you know? So that was the first serious consequence. I saw the disappointment in my parents' face. You know, financially, I saw the little bit of predicament I had put them in. So that was my first major consequence. But being ambitious as I was, I went straight back into waitering. I promised that I would get a job immediately, and I did. I got a job the very next day. And I worked full time. And I worked really hard. I was a diligent worker. I was a reliable worker. I was working as a waiter, and I eventually worked myself up into a manager's position for the franchise that I was working for, and I eventually became regional manager. So this was between the span of 18 to the age of 21. So, which is not something that really happens that quickly. But obviously now I understand, you know, who was looking out for me. But at the age of 21, like, my substance abuse and alcohol and party lifestyle now started to affect my work. You know, and I'll never ever forget it. Like, when I became regional manager, you know, I was like, this is really, wow, you know, I've really ticked a good box in terms of career. But I became sloppy in terms of how I was using substance and drinking. And I was drinking in the office, and I decided to use in the office that evening. Unbeknownst to me, the owner had come to the shop to actually come collect something and came to the office and caught me using. And I was dismissed with immediate
Like
effect.
in the act.
In the act.
Oh, geez.
Of
Get your way
using.
out of that.
So, yeah, and without a doubt, there was no second chances or anything. It was an immediate dismissal. He paid me out what he needed to. But no one ever really knew the real reason for me losing that job. But I very quickly said, well, maybe hospitality is not where I should be.
Yeah.
Because I started seeing danger signs in terms of my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I said I'll pursue something maybe like a sales environment. And I did. I became a floor salesman for Russell's Furniture. And I did very well, and I became a stock clerk. And from there, my ambition was the next step is branch manager, which is what I wanted. And I got it. But then again, due to my lifestyle, poor performance, a lot of sick days, I was called into a few disciplinaries for not performing. I lost that job as well as a consequence of what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I remember each time when things like this happened, like I just constantly just solidified what a failure I was. That's what I was believing. So after that job, I lost quite a lot of money as well in between, and I was living on my own. And I had to move back home because my money had run out, which was fine. I didn't need to pay rent. But I did have enough money saved up to sort of carry me through for a while. And it was there where I just said that Darren deserves a break from life. And it was the worst decision I could have ever made. My using and drinking became a daily thing.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was in a really deep hole of depression. I completely isolated from everyone. I never socialized. I never really went out drinking or using. I always did it at home or by myself. And, I think it was just like a combustion of so many things in life where I just lost all ambition. And I was like, if this is life, like, I don't want it. I'd rather just drink myself to death or hopefully use enough to overdose or, and that's where I did my first suicide attempt, where I took an overdose of pills. And I wasn't successful, unfortunately, with that. But fortunately, I was not successful. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And eventually, all money finished. I needed to start making plans to support my habits. So I had stolen a lot from the house, but I couldn't steal any more from my parents without it actually being noticeable. And I started realizing they were suspecting something's up. Naturally, I was just in denial and defiance when I was ever asked anything. I was I was told that they were going to drug test me and what have you, and I was like, sure, bring the cup. Bring the cup.
I've got this.
Like I said, the denial and defiance of it,
Yeah.
And I think because of that confidence that I exuberated towards my parents, they just never ever thought anything of it. But they could see there was a pattern forming and something wasn't right. So like I said, I couldn't steal anymore, so I had to make another plan. And at this stage, I was 21.
Okay.
I had then decided, well, I'll strike a deal with my dealer, and I said to him, I tell you what, I'll distribute for you, just in order to actually get a bag or two, and maybe a present if I was lucky. And he was happy. It wasn't his petrol; it was my petrol. And it just so happened that after about an 8 or 9 day bender of no sleep and drinking, he called me up the Thursday night and he said, I urgently need a few of the stuff delivered. Can you please help out? So I said, sure, no problem. And like I said, very sleep deprived, not very conscious of my surroundings. I went and collected. And
Sorry, did you have your own car at that time? Or?
So I actually had a 350cc John Way.
Scooter?
Yeah. So that was my transportation.
Proper delivery boy.
Yes. And I went and collected, and I didn't really take note of what was going on around me. I was just happy I was getting what I needed, and it would see me through for a day or so. And I just needed to go and drop off at a few places. And eventually, it was in Boksburg. I was coming down the road, and I saw the blue lights, but I didn't register.
Yeah.
And I still remember thinking to myself, like, can this car just go past? Like, why is this police like right behind me? It wasn't until they actually let the sirens ring that I realized, oh, actually,
It's for me.
it's for me. And this is the insanity of drugs. So I chucked everything out in the street because it was in my sleeve. So I was like, at least they can't catch me because there's nothing on me. I tried to outrun that GTI on a 350cc scooter. And I think to myself now, like, dude, like, seriously. Eventually, like, I slowed down because I was like, I'm not getting anywhere. These guys are on me. And it happened to be Joburg Flying Squad, of all people. And I'll never forget the arresting officers. The ones, Meneer Du Plessis, and the other one I know was Butsia. And they were like, what did you throw out in the road? And again, defiance and denial. I've got nothing, they can't do anything. So the guy was like, no, we saw you throw stuff out in the road. And I was like, no, it wasn't anything like that. So they decided to do a frisk search, and they took out my wallet, and unfortunately I had paraphernalia in my wallet, so I'd obviously put two and two together.
Yeah.
And to this day I want to kick that police officer because he was like, you do know we've got a dash cam and we've caught what you've done on camera. And I think in that moment I was just like, okay, honesty is the best policy here now. And then I was like, yes, it's mine. And then they were like, thank you, we'll follow you home, and we are arresting you, and we'll book you. And they took me home, escorted me home, knocked on my mom's door because I was living at my mom's house. And my mom opened the door and saw these two gentlemen and said, ma'am, we're arresting your son for being in possession and distributing. And I think my mom almost had like a relief in that moment. But she was also in utter shock. And they said, can you please search the room? And then they found obviously more. So when they were booking me, okay, look, I was quite cocky asshole with them. They weren't very friendly, let's put it that way. And I still remember that Meneer Kutsia saying to me, yeah, tonight you got vanaand leer jy lepel. And I was like, what? Like, I'm going to be spooning with someone tonight? That's crazy. And I'm like, well, it is a bit cold. I don't know, like, body heat might be needed. And I didn't really take it seriously, to be very, very honest with you.
Yeah.
Until he said to me, he's like, when you appear in front of the magistrate on Tuesday, I realized it was Easter weekend. So I was like, oh, I'm in for the long run here. He said, you'll be lucky if you get a minimum of 3 years for the amount that you have on you. And because you were distributing. And they locked me up, and I was in that holding cell the Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Tuesday I appeared in court. But while I was in there, like, I didn't get a visit from any of my parents. Nobody came through. And I was okay with it. I was like, it's cool if they've given up, I've given up too. It's fine, you know. Whichever way the dominoes fall, now they fall. And I appeared in court that Tuesday, and I had made friends with a colored guy, like in the holding cells. His name was Michael. He was a really cool guy. He was quite the character, you know. He was our weekend entertainment. And we were sitting in the holding cells downstairs of the courtrooms, and it was about 20 to 4, quarter to 4, and he said, no, brother, they're not calling us out. And I'm like, yeah, but it's fine. They'll take us to the holding cells. He said, no, they're taking us to prison, and then we'll come back tomorrow. So I looked at this guy, and I was like, no, like, we're going to the holding... He's like, we're going to Boksburg prison if they don't call us out. And it was weird. Instinctively, I knew what I needed to do in that moment, and I fell on my knees, and more out of fear than anything else. But I prayed out so loud in that holding cell, and I was like, God, please, like, I don't want to live this life anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to jail. And then I sort of bargained with God as well in that moment,
As we
and
do.
I said, you know what, if you get me out of this, I'll do whatever it is that you need me to do. You know, like, I'm really sweetening the deal here, dude.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
need
yeah.
to step in. And it got to about 10 to 4, and then, like, the anxiety and the reality really set in of, I don't want this for my life.
Yeah.
And out of the blue, a gentleman came and called me from the one side. And he said, hi, I'm your attorney. And I'm like, but I didn't appoint an attorney. He's like, well, you can come out. And we went out. And then he obviously discussed with me what the decision was. And I didn't even have to appear in front of the magistrate. He said that the senior prosecutor reviewed my case. It's a first-time offence. However, the condition for this to be removed from my record is that I am to attend an outpatient program for at least a year, and I need to test 4 times a week. And if I have one positive result, I'll have to come back to court, and then obviously then they will proceed. So I was just like, yo, okay, like I literally prayed a few minutes ago, and I'll never ever forget that guy Michael said to me, yeah, bro, you must pray for me before you go as well. Like, and I never got to pray for him, you know. But I don't think I'll ever forget that guy either. And yeah, so and it was a Tuesday, and I was like, oh, I don't know how I got out of this, but thank you.
Yeah.
And already in my mind, I'm thinking, where's the next Shabine? I'm thirsty. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like instantly, like God has given you something, and
Yeah.
the insanity of your mind is like, a beer would be good right now, you know.
Dodged the bullet. This cracking.
And I walked out the courtroom, and there was my mum and dad, and they had actually bailed me out. And I was like, yo, okay.
Your mom and your dad, or your mom and your stepdad?
My mum and my dad.
Okay.
They had actually decided to work together on this.
Okay.
My mum didn't obviously speak to me, but my dad said to me, he's like, you stink, you need to go home and shower, and we need to be at this program at 7. I was like, okay. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I've seen how meetings go, you know, people sit in a circle, and I was literally withdrawing. I looked like crap. I was like, I just want to go home and eat, because I didn't eat in the holding cells. And I literally had about 20 minutes to half an hour to actually just get ready.
Yeah.
And I was just so lucky to have a bath. And then I had to go to this outpatient program, which so happened to be at a church called Wortenlewe in Boksburg. And yeah, I remember signing up and filling in the documents. And there was a gentleman that ran the program, Toby. He worked for the Hawks. And yeah, he was rough. But he was gentle in his way of being a Christian, but he was very stern in what recovery is. And he laid the foundation saying, you are a court referral, you have no choice. You have to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm the one that needs to work with you. And sat in that church, and a band came up to the stage. Now, I was brought up in a conservative Afrikaans church.
Yeah.
Not used to a band with drums and everything. And mind you, I have only been off the stuff for 4 days. And I didn't sleep properly. And this band started worshipping, and I was just like, okie dokie, this is weird. People were clapping hands, and I was like, this is even more weird.
Yeah.
And then they made us all take hands and pray, and I was like, okie dokie. And in the back of my mind, it's almost like the Holy Spirit's voice said, I'll do anything. My own words echoed in my ears and in my head, and I was just like, okie dokie, cool. And, you know, I stuck it out. I did the program for a year. I stayed clean. But the best thing that happened in that time for me was I got to rekindle my relationship with God.
Yeah.
I got to make friendships in a church environment, which I've never ever had.
Yeah.
I've never had church friends. And one of those actually became my best friend and is now my wife today.
Come on.
You know, and I'm truly grateful for that. And I stayed in the program for a year. Obviously, the 12th step was to carry the message to the still suffering. So I stayed on and I facilitated groups, and I absolutely found a joy in working with people,
Yeah.
In recovery. And it was Christian-based as well, which was so awesome. That's what I'm saying. I just blossomed. I remember, I think it was 2 weeks after I joined that program, there was a gentleman, Darby, you know him very well. He used to facilitate the drug testing. And he insisted that I keep coming the Sunday to church. And I was like, no, I'm doing enough here now. I'm clapping hands already. And, and for some reason, I went to church that Sunday. I convinced my dad to go with me as well. And now it's a mega church. It's not just that little downstairs hall. And I'll never forget, this one lady broke out in tongues next to me. And that was very, very hectic. And then there was this Greek pastor that came onto the stage, and he was literally growling and shouting. And so
very
big. And I was just like, what is this? And then our good friend Lauren, I actually get tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
I actually get choked up when I speak of it. She actually came up to him and asked if she could share a vision that she had received. And the vision she received, she said that there's a gentleman sitting in this church wearing a green top with black hair and a star on his left arm. And you're questioning and you're asking, where to from here? I'm asking you to step out.
Yeah.
I had a green shirt on. I had black hair. The star is on my wrist here.
Yeah.
And that absolutely scared me. And I still remember telling my dad, they weren't even done with tithes and offerings. And she said, it's fine. God said, I'll find you after the service. So I was like, we need to go.
No.
We need to go. And ironically, my dad still said, can you please just get me a cold drink quickly from the coffee shop? I said, sure, but start bringing the car around. And there was this guy in front of me talking with this lady, and I'm like, can this guy just finish? And then I started looking at some CDs and that. And then I heard this lady's voice before I even saw her.
Oh, of course she did.
And she was like, hey, babe. And it was obviously her husband. And I looked at this lady, and she said, it's you. And I just said to her, no, it's not me.
Not me.
And she said, do you want to give your heart to the Lord? And I was like, he's got my heart. What more do you want from me, lady? But that's what I'm saying. God showed up in many facets in my early recovery. And in that coffee shop, I gave my heart to the Lord. That very same day, I went to one of her friend's house and I got baptized. And that's what I'm saying. My journey really blossomed in Christianity again in my first 3 years of recovery. Right. Sober and clean, complete abstinence. Finally got family members trusting me again.
Yeah.
The urge to use disappeared, which was really phenomenal, and I can only thank God for that. And on my 3 years celebration, I was like, you know what, let's just have a drink. You've been fine. You've been fine, and alcohol is not really your problem. It's a substance. And I literally poured myself a double cane and Coke. And to be
This
quite
is at
honest,
home?
This was at home. And this was me celebrating my 3 years of sobriety.
With alcohol.
With alcohol. And I had convinced myself, alcohol is not the
bad.
problem,
Yeah.
it's not the problem. And that resulted in a whole liter finished. And for the first time, I went into a full-on rage when my mom came home. And she was shouting at me, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's part of my story, and it's something I need to remember because that's not who I am anymore.
Yeah.
But in that fit of rage, I gripped my mom by the shoulders and I pushed her against the wall because I wanted to go out, and she didn't want me to go out because she said, if you go out, you're going to relapse. And I was like, no, I'll be fine. I just want to go out to the pub. And in a fit of rage, I took that bottle and I hit her with it. And for me, that alone was scary. I hit her across the head, and I remember just seeing blood. And now I've already had a few run-ins with the cops as it is. And out of fear, I left the house.
And this was the first time you drank?
First time that I drank again
After
after
3
3
years.
years.
Okay.
So it wasn't even just a gentleman's drink. It was,
Ons gaan syp.
yeah, ons gaan syp. And I disappeared from the house, and I was like so ashamed of what I'd done because I had never ever reacted like that with
Yeah.
alcohol. And like I said, I didn't need any more run-ins with the cops as it is.
Yeah.
So I disappeared from the house, and the first thing I did was I went to my dealer, and I relapsed really, really bad. I don't even know where I got money for where I went and how I got to where I was, but I disappeared for a total of 9 days. But I remember that I wanted to use as much as I could with the hopes of dying because I didn't want to go back home and have to tell people and say like I messed up again.
Yeah.
Already I felt like such a failure with everything else in life. Like I had just sort of maintained some sense of normality again.
Sorry, were you working at that stage?
No, so I'd actually lost my job. So I wasn't working, so I was at home.
Okay.
So
sorry, from age 21 to this point now, what is this age here?
23.
23, so you're unemployed for 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then in my third year, that's when I decided to decide to have a drink. So I was unemployed, as well, I forgot to actually brought that up. I was unemployed for a total of 3 years.
Okay.
But I did help the church out from time to time.
Yeah.
And they did remunerate me with a little bit of money. And I actually worked with Lauren, the pastor, who actually called me out. And yeah, so yeah, I disappeared for those 9 days. And I just remember wanting to use enough to overdose or at least get into a situation where I could die. How I landed from Boksburg all the way in Wattville of a township, like when I came to my senses and I actually realized where I was in my surroundings, I had no shoes on, I had a vest on and I had a jean on. And this guy that was with me said, "You need to get out of here, they are going to kill you." And I don't know what I had done, but I could see the seriousness of this. And this guy literally was fearing that I would not make it out of this township.
Yeah.
And again, what do? Jesus.
Please.
Please, I don't want to die.
Last time, promise you.
And, you know, the funny thing is, I went in with the intention of dying, but I didn't really want to die, you know.
Yeah.
And I found my way home, and it just so happened to be a blood moon, as all happening that evening. And like I said, I had been tripping, and I had been on a bender, and I still remember at that time they said with the next red moon or the Mayan calendar or whatever, the world was going to end, or it was something like that. And
2012.
I still remember like looking at this blood moon, walking past the graveyard by Unilever, getting home, and I was like, Lord, let me just get home and say sorry before anything happens, you know. And lo and behold, I got home early morning. It was about after 5 in the morning, and I knocked on the door. My mom opened the door. And she just started crying, and she said, "You know what, last chance." And I was like, "What? Like, how many more times? Like, I would have been happy if she had said, "You know what, go."
Yeah.
Because then at least I could continue. That's what I was hoping for in my mind, is let me just show up so that she can see I'm fine, but let her kick me out, then I can continue doing what I want to. And that was a very low point in my life, and she just said to me, "We need to try again." I said, okay. And I went back into treatment. And I managed to abstain from narcotics completely. I didn't drink for a very long time. I would drink on occasion, but always sort of supervised in a sense. And life was okay, you know. I got back into working as a waiter again. I got that ambition again. I became a manager. At the time, I decided to pursue a career in corporate, and I started working for a real estate agency as an assistant to agents. So I was running 2-3 jobs, just trying to, maintain a good income. In that period, my stepdad had passed away from cancer as well. So it was just my mom and I. So I needed to step up in order to make sure that we survived. And I did that. That's one thing I was good at, is I was good at going into survival mode
Yeah.
and hustling.
Getting it
That
done.
I was good at. So I didn't mind working the 3 or 4 jobs at a
Yeah.
time, you know. I could handle the hours, I could handle that.
Mm.
And eventually, at the real estate agency, I worked out, the CEO saw potential, and he called me once and he said, I want you to move into our head office and run our accounts division. I'm like, I don't have a degree or anything. He's like, no, I don't think you'll need it, you'll be fine. And again, this is just how God steps
Yeah,
in
yeah.
and how God restores if you allow Him to.
Yeah.
And again, I came back into church, and that's where I got to meet you, and where I got to meet Shanae. And I still went on that camp as high as a kite. I'll never
do
ever
remember.
forget that. And you were on this bus, and I was just like, geez, can this guy just sit down? Like, when is the next stop for the garage so I can just, sort of like calm myself, because I can't deal with this guy. But,
Sorry.
But God had an appointed time at that camp,
I agree.
because
I agree.
the friendships I made on that camp are
Yeah.
friendships that are still solid today. And I know if I had to pick up the phone at any point in
Yeah.
time,
Definitely.
be like, Jason,
Let's go.
I need you. Shez, I need you.
Mm-hmm.
This is the blessings that God has given
Yeah.
me. But again, being very arrogant, like I said, alcohol was never a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, even with all of the good things that came, all of the things that happened, meeting my wife, falling in love, I didn't go looking for that either. I just wanted to play in the field.
Yeah.
Because I had been hurt so badly in previous relationships. I think just because of my general lifestyle, like, I didn't trust people.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to open myself up to the point of getting disappointed all the
Yeah.
time. So I had very strong barriers in place. But, I did well at my corporate job. I got promoted to head office. I became an accountant, and when the workload got too much at that company, I found comfort in alcohol again.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what I'm saying, like, alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful.
Say that again.
Alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful. I don't think sometimes we realize the magnitude of what it actually does. And for me, that had always been my solution to the problem. So if things got too tough, instead of just getting on my knees and trusting, I used to when I was intoxicated a little bit. But, my life with God wasn't really on par of where it
Yeah.
should be. I constantly lived in shame and guilt and all of that. And my drinking really then progressed
Yeah.
to a point of where Darren was always a fun drunk to
Yeah.
have around. I had become the embarrassing drunk to myself, to my wife, to friends, to colleagues.
Oh, so you were married at this point?
At this time, then I had married. So that's how I'm trying to get the timeline in for you perfectly. Is John had fallen into the picture at this time.
Yeah.
I thought by getting married, that would fill whatever empty void I had.
All the problems go away.
And all the problems would go away. Didn't. And like I said, I was good at blending.
Yeah.
So people never really picked up on anything. But my lifestyle got to a point, like I said to you, it affected my friendships, my family,
Yeah.
now my marriage as a husband. It affected my relationship with God. There was so much, and when all of this was happening, I did what I did best. I isolated myself from everyone and everything
Yeah.
because it was better
It's easier.
and it's easier.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to unburden myself to anyone. And if I do unburden myself to anyone, I don't want those people to actually know what a mess I really am.
How deep it runs.
And, at that point in time, I was like, I've ticked all the boxes in life of what a man should.
Yeah.
I had a successful career. I had a marriage. I was a good husband. I was a good provider. I was a good son. I was a loving husband. I was a good friend. I was doing my part,
Yeah.
know. But in reality, the minute that alcohol touched my lips, all of that fell away.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it got to a point of where normal people would put family, friends, and everything else before anything.
Yeah.
Whereas I would put my drinking first,
Mm-hmm.
and then work extremely hard at maintaining everything else.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
And it's crazy living in that cycle. And bless my wife, I don't know how she stuck it out. She constantly reminds me that she's got marks on her knees from constantly being on her knees praying. But I just always thought that, Darren, this is what you are.
Yeah.
You're a piece of rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never amount to anything better.
Were those words ever spoken over you as a kid? Did you ever hear those words?
Yes.
Okay.
So when I said to you that my stepdad was very verbally abusive, I'll take a prime example. Like, I sucked at math, and he was really good at math. And instead of being encouraging or motivational about it, he would be like, you're stupid. Like,
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that I took on. There's a lot of things, a lot of labels that the world had given me. And I proudly wore those labels because
Badges.
that is just it, Like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, Darren, you're fat. Yes, Darren, you are stupid. You're not as wealthy as what other people are. You are not as intelligent.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm saying. Like, from a very young age already, I learned to isolate because it was better.
Yeah.
And as a kid, after that whole thing that happened with my dad, the one thing that remained constant in my life was church.
Yeah.
And I was okay speaking to God because at least whatever I told him would not go anywhere.
And he already kind of knows it.
And in my older life, I had trust issues.
Yeah.
I had self-worth issues. I had confidence issues. And people would never say that because I managed to wear masks that didn't show that was going on. And I'm going to sort of bring it into the last 2 years of my drinking career, my life, before I can really say that God really stepped in again.
Yeah.
It was a dark space. It was a very, very dark space for a very long time. And there were a lot of consequences, but you know what? I used to just always say, well, you've sown the seed, the harvest is going to come, and when you need to harvest, you're just going to have to harvest.
Yeah.
And as painful as what that harvest is, you've got a solution. You've got alcohol, firstly to numb whatever you need to, and to give you the courage to deal with whatever you need to harvest. That's extremely warped thinking. That's not normal thinking.
Yeah.
I eventually then became a real estate agent where I was my own boss. Best thing and worst thing that ever happened to me, because I no longer needed to report to a boss.
Yeah.
So already that's where I've come to learn that I have authority issues, and submissive issues.
Yeah.
So I became an agent, and I did really well. And I just unfortunately worked in a crowd of people that drank every single day. It was normal to go to the pub at 12 o'clock. It was normal to have a bottle of wine in your cupboard and open it at 4 o'clock and sit at the office until whatever time, not realizing you have a wife at home and a life at home, or I would either be out in the pubs and drinking, and it was always, hey babe, I'll be home, I'm just going to have one or two.
Yeah.
I make a joke now to my wife, and I'm like, the reason I always said two was because it was the first and the last one. I could never ever tell you how many in between.
The in between, yeah.
So I was telling you the truth. I did have two, the first and the last one.
So you lie to cover a lie.
Exactly. But the drinking then progressed to a point of where I was no longer drinking to numb emotions and that. I was drinking because my body couldn't physically cope without it.
Yeah.
I used to wake up at like 12, 1 o'clock at night in sweats, actually craving alcohol. And it's going to sound insane. I used to get up and go and pour a glass of wine and down it and go back to sleep. I maintained routine very well.
Yeah.
By 7:30, I was out of the house. I became a lone drinker, like I told you. I had isolated again. And I became an 8 a.m. drinker. I stopped at the bottle store first thing before I went to the office with a half jack of vodka and a 6-pack of long toms to see me until lunchtime. It was always the idea, this must last until lunchtime. It was always at least done before I even got to the office.
Yeah.
So I don't know who I was trying to fool, but I maintained a lunchtime routine to ensure I could replenish. And I always made sure that all my appointments were done by 4 o'clock so that I could go and replenish again. And when it got to that time of the afternoon, I'd buy a 5 litre of wine and a 6-pack of beer, and I'd finish a 5 litre of wine sitting at a dam 4 blocks away from my house, pretending that I'm still on appointments, and then coming home and then continuing. And that was my life, like day in, day out, day in, day out. And I just did not know how to get out of it. I could see that my marriage was suffering as a result of it. But Darren was really, really suffering, and I don't want to be alive anymore, you know. And then I kept thinking to myself, but you've got a wife and you've got parents. Like, it wouldn't be fair to them.
Yeah.
And I would always say, but what about me? What about me? What about what I want? And yeah, like I said, gone into real estate as an agent. It was a Friday afternoon. That was my last day of drinking. I had just closed off on my biggest deal on real estate at full commission. And I was like, yeah, we need to celebrate this. Like, this commission is going to be lacquer when it comes in. And naturally, I said to the client, drinks on me, you know. I was literally across the road from my house. The shopping centre was across from the flats. And my wife called and said, what time would you be home? Which was normal because she used to get home at 5 and be like, where are you?
Yeah.
I'll be home now. You know, that Nana never had a definitive timeline. And the client and I actually really gelled and got along very well. So he was ordering shots and I was ordering beers, and, you know, it was just a lack of time. And I think by the 4th or 5th time that my wife called me, all she wanted was for me to bring her a takeaway. And she was starving, and it was already after like 7 o'clock. And I just remember absolutely just losing my cool. And I said to the client, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm going to grab the tab, I'm going to pay, I have to go. And as I was walking out the restaurant, in the shopping centre, a very well-frequent bottle store was still open, which is owned by one of my good Irish friends. And I was like, oh, at least I can make that, you know. And then I can go home and tell my wife, like, I clinched this deal and we have to celebrate.
Yeah.
But little did I know that I was actually purchasing the rosé wine to sort of manipulate her into allowing me to continue. And I walked into the house, and you could see she was angry and she was pissed. And I don't know till this day what she said to me, and she doesn't know what she said to me. But whatever she said brought out such a violent anger in me that I remember walking up to her while she was sitting on that couch, and I was literally ready to punch her in the face. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And the minute that I had lifted my hand, I had crossed an invisible line. I think I'd overstepped a moral boundary for myself, where I was just like, the one thing I said I would never be in my life is my mom and my stepdad.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing here is that as a result of alcohol, as a result of my selfishness, you know. And I just told her, you need to pack your things and go. And she said, I don't understand. I said, I want a divorce. And she said, I don't understand. I said, you're trying to control my life too much, and I can't handle this. I said, your mom and them are also now involved, because her mom also tried calling me. So I thought she had told her
yeah.
mum. So naturally, I was like, "Why are you airing my dirty laundry to your mum? Like they don't need to know about this." And while she was packing in her room, like I had Dutch courage. I called my mum-in-law, and in very colourful language, told her that I'm done with their daughter,
Yeah.
and I'm done with them. And this lady who does not swear, who is very prim and proper, turned around and actually said, "You know what? No. If you, I'll never forget those words in my life coming out of her mouth."
Please just tell us her name.
Hey,
Please tell us her
Tani
name.
Snolly. So, yeah, and Chandra was in tears, my wife was in tears. And I remember I didn't feel anything for her, like while she was crying. And I was like, "You're not packing quick enough, like get out."
Yeah.
And I forced her out of the house. I forced her into her car. And eventually she rolled down the window and she just said, "Can I just ask you one thing? Can I just say one thing?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "For once I wish you'd choose me and not that bottle." And when she said those words to me, dude, it was gut-wrenching. It was something that almost like rips at your soul,
Yeah.
where you just like, ow, ow. And I said to her, "Don't go." And she said, No, you said I must go, I'm going. And I was like, what have you just done? You know, they always say regrets always come too late, you know. And I watched her drive out, but I had come home with a whole case of beer and I had a whole 5-litre wine in the house. And I had every reason to now
Smash.
just go back wild. Like, I'm getting divorced, poor me,
Yeah.
you know, life sucks, poor me.
Yeah.
There's a reason I brought up the word selfish, because that is the behavior that I was acting out on, was selfish behavior. And when I went into that house, I have felt a brokenness in my life. I have felt,
Yeah.
defeated, but this was different. This was something really different. I was completely and utterly, mentally and spiritually bankrupt. I had nothing in the tank.
Yeah.
And I sat on the lounge floor and I remember I prayed out again. And I don't think I've ever prayed with such earnestly in my life where I said to God, I cannot do this anymore. And I was very specific in my prayer because I had learned that when you pray, be specific in what you pray. And I said, God, one of two things needs to happen here tonight. Either you need to deliver me completely, or I will remove myself completely. Those are the two options.
Yeah.
And I left it there. And like I said, I had every excuse to go out now and to go and jail. For some reason, I remained rooted in that house. I can't remember when last I had actually cried that much. But that was a cry of pain and brokenness. I landed up binge watching, a zombie story. I can't even remember what zombie story it was. My mom eventually pitched the next morning because apparently I had called her. I'm very, very drunk and I was very emotional. I was like, I'm going to take my life and, all these type of things. And this is the thing, we don't realize how you actually affect the people around you. And she pitched at the flat at 5, like just to see if I was there because the phone was off. Naturally, I had to be extra dramatic and just switch the phone off, and her screaming at the gate. And I'm like, what are you doing here? Like, leave. I don't want anyone here. And she's like, you're scaring me. I said, I'm also scaring me, but I'll be fine. You need to go. And she left. But when the reality of everything had set in, it's like I had come full circle in terms of certain aspects. And I got a phone call. It was around about 5 o'clock. And it was from my wife. And I was very hesitant to take that call. Because I was like, dude, you told her you wanted a divorce. You're not going to back down now. You're not going to look like an idiot. But then something inside of me said, humble yourself. Humble yourself enough to actually just take the call. You know, take ownership of what you've done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to take ownership of anything. It's their fault.
Yeah.
You know, it's not my fault.
Mm.
And the conversation was very brief. It was very cold. And I think that hurt even more was I'm not used to hearing that tone of voice come out of her. And she said, my parents want to see you. And I said, there's no way I'm coming today. I'm way too hungover. I haven't had a touch of alcohol. I'm shaking. I'm sweating. I'm a mess. I said, I'll rather come tomorrow. But I was also fearful as well of what to expect when I go. And I slept that night. And I slept right out. And I woke up the next morning. And something very clearly said to me, before you go and do anything, go to church and make right with God. And I did. And I prayed in that service, and I asked the pastor to pray with me, and I told him what was going on.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm scared. I don't know how to fix this. Like, God will guide you. And I went to my in-laws, and I went and to go and fix my mess. And I walked into that house very, very shameful because, you know, my in-laws, they are very decent people.
Very much.
For me to go off the extreme of saying things that I didn't, and swearing and treating, they didn't deserve it at all. And we sat in silence for a good 5 minutes. I had the buddy on this side of me, and I had the mom-in-law that side of my wife there, all of them looking at me, and I'm like, what do you want from me? Like, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
And this is why I say God does hear your prayers.
Yeah.
This uncle eventually broke the silence, and he said to me, so what are we going to do about this? And it took almost every ounce of pride and ego to be set aside. And I said to him, I don't know how to stop drinking, if that is what you want from me. And he said, well, aren't you lucky? I'm a recovering alcoholic and I'm sober for 26 years.
Come on.
You know, and I looked at this, I mean, I had been married for 3 years. I had known my wife and her brother for, 8, 9 years. I didn't know their parents or her dad was a recovering alcoholic. And I was just like, I remember sitting in that chair and I was like, thank you. Thank you. And he ordered us to go home and sort out how things, and we did that. But he said, you would be here on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And I said, no problem. I didn't dare argue or say anything at this moment. And I went the Tuesday night. My wife and I reconciled. And when I made amends this time, I felt it was a different type of amends. It was sincere, you know. We spoke about a lot of things, and I also had to get out a lot of things from my side. But God allowed me that platform. She took 2 days off of work as well, because I was like Shaky Stevens.
Yeah, I get you.
For like a good solid week and a half. And she was there to like sort of help and just be supportive. And we went the Tuesday night to her dad, and he came out, and I said to him, and now, Uncle, what now? He said, I'm taking you to a meeting. Hey, and all the ego and pride started coming back immediately. I was like, I ain't going to any meeting. I'm not sitting in a circle with other people again and having to tell them that I have a problem and having to share, like, I've done this. I've done this. But then again, I was reminded, I asked for a specific thing. So eventually I was like, just put aside everything. You know, just shut up and listen. And I went to that meeting, and they did want me to go back to the previous outpatient meeting, but I didn't want to because it was religious and God was involved. This shows you how far down the scale I went again. I
Were you
felt too
attending
ashamed.
services at all?
So not many. So a lot of them were because
show face.
to show face, and because my wife was a leader, you know, to show united front. But I knew I wasn't living right, and that's why I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And that's why I didn't go to a Christian outpatient program, because I felt so shameful. And I also didn't want people in the church to see me in a program while my wife is in leadership.
Yeah.
You know, like I felt like I've put her through enough.
Yeah.
So I went to AA, and it was okay. And it was nice because they didn't speak of God and they didn't speak of whatever. You know, the man that shared that evening, he swore and he cussed. But when he spoke his truth.
Yeah.
And I could relate and identify 100% completely with everything that he was saying. I was like, this guy is literally speaking my story, you know? And I still remember they asked, like, how long have you been sober? I said, well, 3 days. And they were like, oh, so you're 24 hours in less than a month? Like, come up and get a chip. And these people started clapping hands for me, and I'm like, what the hell are you people so happy about?
Yeah.
Like, seriously, like, like I have to now sort of live a life without alcohol completely.
Yeah.
And I came to realize that my rock bottom was I couldn't live with alcohol.
Yeah.
I couldn't live without it. But God made a way for me to get through that.
Dude, I got a question for you. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm going completely off because this is something that's been highlighted straight through, and I need to get to this thing. So you had forgiveness from Christ in jail. You have your mum that you hit your mum with the bottle and she forgave you. You had your wife now that you almost destroyed everything. Selfish, going into this thing. And I want to circle all the way back. So now you've got your stepfather's, let's call it your step uncle, what the sexual assault, where he was and what he did. How were you able to forgive him? Do you see what I'm saying? How did that full circle go around?
So when I first came into recovery, I thought I had forgiven him.
Yeah.
I hadn't. When I came into recovery the second time around, and I started working through the steps, it was the first time in what we can say about 11 years, 12 years since it had happened, no, even longer, 13 years, 14.
Okay.
I was doing step work, and, you know, sexual abuse came up as a question.
Yeah.
And it hit home because I was like, no, I have to deal with this again. And I thought I had processed it. I thought I had processed it. But in actual fact, I hadn't processed anything. I had just suppressed everything.
Yeah, tucked it away.
And that opened up a raw wound. Because now I'm completely sober and I'm having to feel what I have to feel. I can't drown it out.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing that happened in actually speaking about it in a group setting, I came to realize it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
I wasn't to blame for that.
Come on.
He made the choice.
Yeah.
And I was able to forgive him this time around because, to be quite honest, to openly speak about it, and it's hard to not get emotional about it. Like I said, I'm very good at composing myself.
Yeah.
But that's something that sometimes still eats at me, but I need to work on that. But I need to remember that I'm an alcoholic and I've got a sickness. Whatever that man did, he obviously had his own form of sickness.
Yeah.
And we are all God's people at the end of the day.
Come on.
And vengeance was not up to me. That was up to God. He would deal with that when the time came.
Yeah.
And when I got to understand it in that aspect and accept that it wasn't my fault, you know, only then did I forgive myself, which was the hardest part of it. But once I had forgiven myself for labeling that on myself, I was able to forgive him.
I get you.
And it was liberating.
Sorry. I don't know why this thing has come up. Somebody that has gone through that assault and gone through that thing, give them advice, bro. What would you do? What did you not do, and what should you have done?
I think what I should have done was gone and spoken to a trusted person. Unfortunately for me, my relationships in my household was so volatile that I didn't trust anyone in my household really. And when it came out that it happened, it came out at a birthday party of mine in, again, a drunken fit of rage where it came out. And this was at the age of 19, where I first actually ever vocally said it out loud, but obviously being so intoxicated that the tongue was loose and it needed to come out, that my mom had to choose sides in this whole situation, and she had to protect her marriage at the same cost.
Yeah.
And she now has told me that she never believed that I lied about it, but I needed to understand that she also needed to protect her marriage, so she had to be united with him. So, and I said to her, but at the end of the day, you made a choice. You made a clear-cut choice. You stood by them and you saw me go through the court process of what I had to. I said, and here I'm standing and you're telling me I'm a liar.
Yeah.
Because obviously there was no trust.
Yeah.
I was seen as a drunk. I was suspected of being on drugs. I was a rebel. And why would they trust or believe anything like that?
Yeah.
And why didn't I say anything when it happened? Now, that was where the debate came in, is why only at the age of 19 did I come out of it when this happened to me 14, 15 and 16 years? And I can't actually answer you why I didn't tell anyone. I was fearful of what it would do to my family, and I was ashamed. So my advice would be, if it should happen to you, find someone that you trust.
Where?
Anyone. Your pastor, your aunt, your cousin,
Teachers
your sister,
at schools.
your schools. You know, find a trusted person that you can go to with this. And that person might actually be able to guide you in taking the necessary steps.
Yeah.
My dad was the one that had to advocate for me to actually lay a charge. So I haven't even included that part into my story, which was also very traumatic. At the age of 19, having to sit in a court and they ask you questions. So what exactly happened? And you have to go into such specific details over and over and over, only for the court to turn around and say, we cannot proceed with this matter because it has lapsed. It had lapped the time in which I should have reported it. So they dismissed the case against him. So you can imagine how that fueled into my addiction in my younger age. And I was 21 years old and all of that was going on. So it's crazy. It's really, really crazy. But it's not easy to talk about it. But I've come to learn the more I do the uncomfortable thing, the easier it becomes to do that uncomfortable thing. It's not easy sitting up here bearing my soul to you and an audience. But at the end of the day, like we said earlier, it's to glorify one person.
Come on.
This is not about me. This is not about the accolades I've made within my life. It's about the person that has enabled me to get to where I am today. Where I can sit here comfortably in my skin and tell you, hey Jason, I'm an alcoholic. Hey Jason, I'm an addict. Hey Jason, I'm a sexual assault victim. Hey Jason, I'm all of this, but you know what the best thing is? I'm covered.
And redeemed.
I'm covered and redeemed.
Come on.
And I'm a work in progress. I'm not going to ever be perfect. I said, but at least I try and do the next right thing as far as I can go. Entering into the rooms of AA was probably the best way for me to find God again, as if God could ever be lost. The very first thing that they read out in their preamble is, if anything that is shared by the speaker does not align itself with our big book, which is their basic text, should be disregarded, should it not reconcile with the big book. And immediately there, I was like, that sounds exactly what Christ has instructed us to do in terms of our spirituality. Is you listen to a speaker or you listen to a preacher, and if you feel something doesn't sit right, it's your job to go and test
Yeah.
what that preacher is saying. And I very quickly came to realize, I was like, I'm not going to get away from this God thing, because the principle that they've instilled is actually a Christian principle.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, my first meeting, they closed off with a serenity prayer, and I was like, I don't understand. But that was the one thing that I felt most comfortable doing, is saying the serenity prayer. And because I was so shameful for such a long time, didn't want to really communicate with God.
Yeah, yeah.
But when things got tough, that prayer is what carried me through.
Yeah.
And it says, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's a shorter version of it.
Yeah.
The biblical or the Christian version of it says, taking hardship as a pathway to peace. That already tells me what journey I'm on. I'm going to have to take hardship as a pathway to peace. When you choose to become a Christian or a reborn Christian,
Yeah, yeah.
we choose a narrow road. I had been on a wide road for a very long time and fooled and deceived myself that I was this Christian. I was this wonderful Christian. And yes, I think God still loved me in that. I know God would have forgiven me. But coming into the rooms of AA and not having God rammed down my throat was God telling me, I am a gentleman.
Yeah, that's good.
And I stand on the other side of the door. You need to open it.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful to the fellowship of what I do attend. I've managed to start a recovery ministry as well, based on this, a Christian recovery
Come on.
program, which contains 12 steps. And
Sorry, what's it called?
it's Anchor Recovery
And where can we find that?
in Fulham Tartar Road in Word and Life Benoni campus. So, yeah. So that happens on a Thursday night. We're still fairly small, but I'm trusting God will send the right people. But I also need to realize it's an addiction ministry. I've worked in addiction ministry. You know, people come and go. If it's just one person, that's cool.
Yeah.
As long as I get to make a difference
Yeah, yeah.
and allow God to do what He needs to. And that is now what I try and do to the best of my ability, is Thy will be done, not my will.
Come on.
I have experienced probably the best life ever in the last 2.5 years of being sober.
Okay.
And I feel it's probably because I feel that I'm probably my most authentic self that I've ever been.
Yeah.
It took a lot of work to get to the point of actually loving myself.
Yeah.
You know? And that was scary for me because, like, I remember it was about 18 months into my recovery. I stood in front of the mirror and I was getting ready for work, and I literally looked at myself and I was like, I actually like this guy. Like, it's just really beautiful.
Yeah.
Like,
That's good. That's good.
I always say a collateral beauty had to happen in order for this
Come on.
to blossom. And now I do. I say to God, here's my hands and feet. Here's my mouth. Use me.
Send me.
You know, my marriage, I thought my marriage was blossoming. You know?
Yeah.
But the devil is also extremely cunning. You know, when I speak to people that my wife and I almost got divorced, you know, people have this perception of what they see on Facebook and what they see at church. And, I mean, people have literally been like, there's no way.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes way. Like, that is how the enemy works. I said, and there's one thing that the enemy does not like is marriage. I said, but at the end of the day, I made the choices.
Yeah.
It didn't make me a bad person. I just made the wrong choices. However, I needed to be humbled to my knees by a bottle of alcohol in order for me to find all of this again.
Yeah.
And like I said, I am an unapologetic Jesus freak,
Come on, dude.
and I'm an unapologetic alcoholic and addict. And if I can give any hope to anyone, I've even had family members say to me, considering what life I've gone through and where I am now, they would never have thought that it would happen. And I mean, my uncle and them have got me honest there in case of emergency, you know, and they were like, if this was 3 years ago, probably never have even put your number down. But that is restoration. My relationship with my dad went through a lot of turmoil when I was in recovery, but God is slowly restoring that as well. What I'm constantly learning is to surrender, to surrender daily, because the minute I take the wheel, self will run dry it. My best thinking got me to where I was.
Yeah.
So God's gently telling me, like, you don't need to think about everything.
You outrun a GTI with a scooter.
And that's just it, Jay. Like, I don't know if I've rambled on or if I've covered everything.
You're good, bro.
But I'm grateful. And
In closing, I know you've got a poem you want to
yeah,
read to us, but after that poem, will you please close and pray for us?
sure.
Awesome.
There was a poem that was read in one of the meetings by a Scottish man. Thank goodness for my mum and them being Scottish, I could understand what he was saying. But it's called The Man in the Glass. When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you a king for a day, then go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't a man's father, mother, or wife whose judgment upon him must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in life is the man staring back from the glass. He is the fellow to please, never mind the rest, for he is with you to the end, and you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You can fool the world down the pathway of years and get pats on your back as you part, but the final reward will be heartache and tears if you've cheated the man in the glass. And that speaks to self-love and self-discovery. And that poem for me is so beautifully written, because when I look in the mirror, I'm no longer an enemy with myself. I have now reconciled with myself, and I'm friends with that person. You know, and that is all that matters. You know, the rest will follow. So thanks for having me on
Pleasure, bro.
Encounter King's Encounter.
Chief, bro, will you close in prayer for us?
Sure, not a problem.
Awesome. Thank you.
Father God, Lord, we just come to you this morning, and I just want to thank you for the opportunity where I could just come and share my story and bare my soul. Lord, we pray that this message will go out to someone and just touch whoever it needs to. Lord, we just pray for this ministry, that your hands will continue to be upon it. Lord, we know the mission that they have. The mission is to go forth and to spread your wonders and your miracles, Father God, Lord. We live in a world that is in disarray, and sometimes people just need a glimmer of hope and a flicker of light. And may this ministry be that for people. And we trust that you will grow them from strength to strength. And I want to thank you for where you have brought myself in my life, where you have brought myself and Jason as friends in life. And yes, Lord, we just bless the hands that are working here today, doing the camera work. And just want to say we love and we honor you, Lord Jesus. And we pray for this in your mighty name. Amen.
Amen, amen. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope you got something out of this. And if you guys did enjoy this, please leave a like, leave a comment, and in the description,